Okay, are you ready? Our next dialogue, entitled Designing Today's Tomorrows. I had to get this right, because tomorrow, anyway. Visioning, strategy, ideation, passion, they're all wonderful words, but how can we bring this into fruition? The next step is design. How do we take all the ideas which we create, understand the context we are in, underpin it, all with data, reality, and make the blueprint for our world? This is so much to me of what design does, and architects. We have two really fantastic gentlemen. We're going to come on up to the stage, Markus and Eric. Come on up and join me, please. There's the stairs over here, unless you want to leap. Great to have you right here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Markus, come on, here we go. There we go. So, now, guys, I've known both of these gentlemen for a little bit. Eric, we've probably known each other for 50 years.
No, 20
Dude,
years.
come on. I'm not that old. I don't know how old you are. But we've probably known each other for about 25 years in architecture, looking at 2030. This is a program trying to look in the United States with architects trying to look towards 2030 and getting the SDGs. And so I've known you in many different iterations, and it's kind of interesting. And Markus, we've met each other mostly, when we really got to know each other better, was with a dinner with Kim Stanley Robinson, was the author of Ministry for the Future. And it was really great with you and your wife and your kids. It's really been great to know you both. Now, both of you are very accomplished designers and architects. And I really appreciate that. And I want to ask you, in your mind, you've been hearing now for the past couple of days what we've been talking about, right? What are some thoughts which you can just, on the top of your head, Eric, what's on the top of your head when you hear what we're talking about?
I spend most of my time flying around North America, talking
But
to...
you mean taking a train around, don't you?
No.
No.
Flying.
Okay.
Train? No. I wish.
Yeah.
But I kind of am dropped into different cities and then trying to help them find pathways to decarbonize. And part of the reason why I wanted to come here was because I thought, the Europeans, they'll have it all figured out. I'll go there and I'll learn a lot, and then I'll bring all this back. But you guys, no, you're just as screwed as we are, basically, with the future. No offense, with the problems and challenges facing us with the climate crisis. So we're all in the same boat, I think, is kind of my big, just selfish takeaway.
Yeah.
But also, coming here also gives me a lot of hope. It's interesting how many connections we have here, just talking to people, and we go on LinkedIn and we realize we have 150 connections in common, but we've never met.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But one of the things you talk a lot about is decarbonization. And you said, there's a quote, I think, we've hit a plateau in decarbonization, and yet we seem to have, I know here as we talk to the Bundesamt für Energie, our Ministry of Energy, they have all sorts of prototypes and ideas of things that we could be doing. But why do you say this?
All of the major firms in the U.S. are following this protocol called 2030, and we report how much energy reduction we're getting in our buildings, and we're all stuck between 50 to 60%. And we're trying to figure out why, and in a certain sense, it makes sense, right? We've kind of squeezed the low-hanging fruit, so we've gotten those efficiencies, then we've done kind of more advanced things and gotten those efficiencies, but now to get to that next 40, 50% is much, much harder. So it feels like we're stuck. Even with embodied carbon, we're all doing things to reduce the embodied carbon in the building. So I'm able to get 35% of the carbon out of the concrete pretty easily. I can get 50% a little more aggressively, but getting beyond that, again, we're stuck. So, the first 50% was almost the easy part. We're really trying to push clients into looking at mass timber, changing their mindsets, changing how they look at materials, changing how they look at operations, changing how they look at maintenance, in order to move them in this place that they're open to get off this plateau, to get to this kind of regenerative future that we keep trying to sell them on.
So Markus, you have a background as a biologist, an architect, an author, philosopher, an educator. That's how I kind of look at you. You're sort of this undescribable person. You have an office in Zurich. You were shaking your head as Eric was talking about this challenge.
Shaking, like nodding, you mean, of course.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. So, okay, nodding your head, not shaking, it's nodding. It's an interesting cultural thing there, yeah. So you were nodding your head. So does that resonate with you as well? Have we hit a plateau for decarbonization here as well?
You know, I think the story of sustainability in architecture, of course, is manifold. You know, there are many levels on which we need to think and act. One is the kind of project level where we do our best to fulfill certain ideas and live up to our ambitions and our responsibilities. The second point is, however, also brutally said, we are ticking boxes in for market access, right? We need to fulfill certain features in our buildings in order to be marketable, in order to have a job as an architect in a world which requires sustainable buildings. You know, and then the last level of sustainability is basically the level where we then really try to reduce our footprint, and that might actually damage our own business to some degree, right? And there was this extremely beautiful building by Herzog de Meuron, which I visited a couple of weeks ago in Basel, a building which is fully made of timber. It has no basement, and it is covered completely in photovoltaics. It's an Energy Plus building. But most importantly, it has no building technology in it. You know, so the engineers working on the buildings, the electrical engineers, the plumbers, all the people who earn money with complexity did not have a place in that building, and therefore were kind of conceptualized out of existence, right? So if we are truly trying to reduce our footprint, we need to go towards the simple, not the complex, and going towards the simple will destroy jobs, it will destroy value chains, it will destroy all sorts of other things and open other doors, right? But opening these other doors, specifically for me, like as an architect, it's kind of brutal because I'm locked in. I have an office of 40 people, I need to feed them, so I can do certain things but not other things, right? You have an office of 1,500 people, your lock-in is equally brutal, you know? And so we are all creatures of today's society and today's market. And for us really to make the transition goes against the grain, you know, and I think the last 50% we need to do by going against the grain, and that is hard and difficult.
And that's going against the grain. What you think about here, you've got tradition, but you mentioned mindset shifts. You were talking about going against the grain. They're kind of similar, if I hear you both. And I know, Eric, you have a certain set of mindset shifts which you have evolved in your practice.
Last year, 5 years ago, let me rewind. 5 years ago, I realized that it's not my job to sell the client on sustainability. That would be like me selling them on safety or, you know, being reasonable. Like it's just such a weird concept. So I'm not selling anybody on sustainability. Instead, we work with the client to map out the outcomes that are important to them and then use sustainability to achieve those outcomes. So if we're designing a school, a typical outcome is we want to boost student performance. If we're designing a hospital, it's to boost patient, recovery times, right? They're very obvious outcomes, but I'm using sustainability to achieve those outcomes. The beauty of that, I found, is that the clients get a buy-in. They see it as almost the headline, and so it's a lot less likely for it to get value engineered out or pulled out of the project, because they know it's contributing to this larger outcome. So over the last 6 months to a year, we've been realizing that the clients themselves are stuck. And Markus, the other Markus, was saying this morning. They're trying to invent the future using the language of the past. So I started using these mindset shifts with them, like as an exercise, very early on. And by early, I mean before we even won the job. I do it in the interview. And here are the mindset shifts that you need to make in order to get into the right place to build a truly net zero, regenerative, zero carbon building. Because the old way of thinking doesn't cut it. And I started with 5, and now there's 21 of them. They keep growing. I won't do all 21, but
No, you won't.
Well, a typical one is to really view the systems in terms of abundance instead of scarcity. really shifting them from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset.
Yeah.
So we don't look at it in terms of limited capacity. We look at it in terms of the site and what is the potential on the site. We did this in the tents earlier. I said, what do we have in abundance here in the valley? And that changed the conversation. And it opened up new possibilities that a scarcity mindset does not.
I think that's a really great one, just to pause for a moment on this. I mean, seriously, this mindset of abundance, which is around positivity and opportunity, rather than the mindset of loss and scarcity, and we're going to all go down the tubes. I mean, this is a really important mindset. I think this.
Somebody write it down.
Yeah, well, he already wrote it down.
He wrote it down, great.
He's writing it down. I guarantee he's writing it down. But this is really important, this idea of mind. So for us, when we're looking at these worlds, for our stories, to have a mindset of abundance. No matter what this is, we're moving into how will this be an abundant world. I think that's really great. And before I want you to do a couple more, but not quite yet, because we were talking, I know one thing that's really interesting, you're very interested in is also connectedness, and that has a lot to do with abundance and how you connect to be it. So tell us a little bit more about that.
I mean, La Punt is the perfect example of it. La Punt, the bridge, Pons, Ponte, so the bridge. It's basically a dot on this valley which is defined by one axis going Maloja to Como, right, Italy, to Innsbruck, to Austria. And the other line is via the Albula Pass to the Bündner Herrschaften and so on. And at this point, the Albula Pass comes down and there's a bridge going over to the other side, right? And around that bridge, the Albertini family, since the 1500s or something, started building the houses and living a really prosperous life because they were connected to the larger scale, right? They were not a farmer on a clearing in a forest, all isolated. They were connected to, at that world history time, to a global stage, right? It was the Romans who already traveled these Engadine valleys, and then of course the Venetians and so on. A lot of the people up here made money by, for example, baking things for the Venetian oligarchy, for example, and so on. So I think even though we are in a retreat, we are in a valley, we're in a mountain resort, so to speak, we are still part of a global society. And that's due to this abstract term, connectedness. And we humans have a huge penchant to look for connectedness, right? We are mammals, which want to have our linkages to other people. We want our stories to be heard. We want to talk to others and so on, right? And so this is something deeply inside us, right? And this we project on the world, turn it with our tool thinking and technology into a highly technological and highly infrastructuralized world. So that little La Punt then, like Köln, you could also take Cologne, Köln, at a kind of a fork of the River Rhine, an old city which then became bigger and bigger, more and more important because it wanted to connect to the world, because we human beings want to connect to the world. That generates markets, that generates surplus, that generates social differentiation, and generates that type of complexity which allows us to have the civilizations we live in today.
So I think that's really fantastic. So again, as you iterated, which maybe we didn't really check, is this idea that this is a node. Can you guys hear okay? It's sort of, we're, okay, yeah. We're connected to the sky right now. This is a very important way. This is, and it won't last all that long, I know, we know that, but we're in the mountains. Just have it. But this idea of being part of a bigger system is quite interesting. This connected, the pathways of connected, and also the human connectedness, right? As this community is a community of connection. And I think this is also, because we're talking from an urbanistic standpoint, and your fascination with this sort of deep urbanism, but also you're talking, Eric, about your mindset just in the urgency which there is in order for us to act. And sometimes this connectedness gets really fast, sometimes it's slow, but we all feel this urgency now. And maybe that's making our connectedness stronger or weaker. But tell us about urgency, and I want you to tell us about this too.
At first I tried to protect the clients from how dire things are, because I didn't want to move them into this place of fear. But I also realized that the human brain can't really assess a risk from far away. So now I start every workshop with a very big slide that's a countdown to 2030. And it does it in real time. So it shows the number of days and the number of months to 2030. Because every client, for some reason, thinks 2030 is 10 years from now. And it's not. It's 67 months away and ticking.
I think, Eric, we're going to have to wait just a minute.
Oh, yeah?
Can you guys hear him okay? Oh, I really can. Okay, well, okay. We'll keep going then. Oh, yeah, you're right next to the speaker. I see you there, right there. Everyone in the back.
He hears great.
So 67 months.
Because all of their goals are tied to 2030. They all have sustainability targets. They're not making progress on them. So we flash this up at the beginning. You've got 67 months to make some progress. Some of our buildings aren't even going to finish construction by 2030. So that means that this is not this abstract, far-off, distant thing. This is a now thing. If you want to build a building that's ready for the future, you need to build it today. We're even modeling the climate based on not today, but what it's going to be mid-century. We have projects that are potentially going to be underwater by 2050. So we're doing climate assessments now. We're lifting the sites. We're building walls. In some cases, we're moving them uphill. And we're modeling the mechanical systems not for how hot it's going to be today, but how hot it's going to be in the future. So we're future forecasting, but doing it now. It's a weird place to be in. It also ties a little bit into circular economy stuff because we're thinking about what part of the building is going to last through the century, what part of the building will get remodeled in 20 years, what part will be remodeled in 5 years, and trying to adjust the design for that. Yeah. But the building the urgency triggers a part of their brain of, it's what I call the oh crap moment. Like, oh crap, we have to do this. Yeah. And that's a good place to be in.
So I think we're all kind of in that crap. So what are some of the things, if I come to you to ask a similar thing about the urgency, what are some of the things, like if you've walked around here a little bit, right? We're up across to the same elevation as Denver, et cetera, what are some things which you would, if you were going to design something here, what are some of the things, the principles you might instigate or encourage us to think about?
Well, that I've been thinking about for the last 3 days, obviously, right? But deploying passive house strategies on the walls should get thicker and to be able to deal with the extremes of hot and cold that you're going to feel here. Harnessing the water in a more sustainable way.
I'm not sure if that was agreement or disagreement,
that's
what you just said. Historically, our walls.
But the river, for example, the river is raging. It's at capacity now. That's today. We're talking about 2040. It's going to be a mess, and that water doesn't look very drinkable. So moving it upstream, slowing that water, harnessing it for energy, and harnessing it for storage, filtering it using living machines. All of that seems like a no-brainer to do now to anticipate the growth of the future. And then all of that water flows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So unlike solar, which only works when the sun is up, you could be generating energy all the time. So it invites battery storage in. The batteries can be wired in series, so you add some now, you add more later. As this,
Yeah.
And then really switching from this tourist destination mindset into a place-making, sense-making mindset of what do we grow here? What could we grow here? How could we attract people here? How could we work with the other towns down valley and make this part of a network and use the interconnected infrastructure of the rail system that's already there to tie all that together? The trains run down to the minute here. It's wonderful. But wouldn't it be great if you kind of got on a train, hopped off at each station, did a little shopping at each station, so you could do all your stuff?
You might be surprised if you lived here for a little bit. We'll invite you to come back for a week or two. You might live a different life and never want to leave. And
then just because I'm nerdy about it, I would orient every window to a mountain peak, so every room would just lock onto the mountain. But that's just me.
No, I think this is what the ancients did when they built their houses here. Actually, we might have gotten away from some of that, but just respecting where we are, urgency, and some of the things that Eric was just talking about. How did you react to that?
I think the term connectedness I used earlier is like any technology we humans have, because connectedness is in the end always technological, or we live it as human beings very much technologically. I'm even technologically connected to you now, so I don't have to use my physical, biological voice, but I have an augmented voice augmented by technology, right? So we live connectedness today very much by technology. And cities in many ways are catalysts and fusion reactors for that type of connectedness. However, connectedness generates a couple of things. It allows us to socially differentiate, it allows us to divide work, it allows us to generate surplus, but it also draws resources, people, ideas, stories from the hinterland, which are increasingly global. So connectedness in the end, specifically when it becomes more and more efficient, is actually the opposite of resilience, right? Because we're just tied into these supply chains and we cannot live without them anymore. We are tied even emotionally to these type of gatherings. It's hard to exist without this type of exchange, right? So connectedness becomes something which in the end we rely on, we are dependent on, and it's impossible to feed 8 billion people on the planet without the type of technological connectedness we enjoy today. And connectedness we achieve through abstraction. We abstract from the local. We abstract the physical into the virtual. We abstract away from nature, right? We turn nature into culture in this continuous drive to be more connected to each other and the ideas we share as human beings. And at a certain point, we start to realize that this is maybe a trap. Maybe it's a dead-end development. Maybe it just, on a very fundamental level, doesn't work. And therefore, the other term, which for me is increasingly important as an antithetical term, is the idea of embeddedness or embodiment. That we need to find back to the location, back to ourselves, back to the ability to live a non-material, in some ways also non-mobile life, which inherently would be much more sustainable than what we do now, right? So the urgency for me is twofold. First of all, system awareness. We need to understand how we operate, how we human beings operate as a system on the planet. It has to do with complex system science, it has to do with pattern recognition, maybe AI can be helpful, etc., right? And on the other hand, we need to find those values and in the end policies which allow us then to really work against that. Because in my vision, we will be forced to have more simplicity in the future, either by design or by default, right? And it should be much rather design than default, because I would like to have a say on how this simplicity comes upon us.
I hear that. I think that's really great. Thank you. Embeddedness is quite interesting. I haven't heard you talk about that before, so I'm going to come back to you. But right now, Eric, what do you think about this? So you've had some mindset shifts. Is embeddedness one of them? Simplicity one of them? Or how about you pick another one to give us or system awareness?
Embeddedness and simplicity are probably woven through all 21. But another one that I like, and it builds on the abundance one, is this idea that energy is not a cost. If energy is costing you something, you're doing it wrong. Energy is revenue, because every day 5,000 times more energy falls on your site, and you can either choose to collect it or choose to ignore it, but it's still there. So if you're doing your job correctly, your energy is making you money, right? It's an abundance mindset. And again, these are the mindset shifts that we need to get them to move to this place of looking at it, because otherwise they will most people will focus on the upfront cost first. They'll think about how much it takes to operate it later. We've tried to do life cycle assessments to get them to change their mind. Instead, I'd rather just shift their mindset from the beginning of, we're going to look at the site in a new way. We did a hospital in Wisconsin, which is very snowy. It's like here. It's a very snowy place. And the facility manager he's been at his job for 25 years. He's got the sweater vest. He's got the hair part. He's got, he looks the role. And he's good at his job. He's done what he's supposed to do, which is to mitigate risk, to remove all the unknowns. And here comes me waving my arms around like a lunatic saying, hey, you got to do all this, right? It doesn't really jive. So instead I said, what bugs you the most about your job? What keeps you up at night? And he said, we spend $95,000 a year plowing snow. And I said, why? And he said, because it's Wisconsin. It covers the parking lot. We got to plow the snow. We do it all the time. It's just such a waste of money because then the snow melts and new snow comes. And at the same time, we're having a conversation about spending $3 million to keep this old steam boiler plant going that's like held together with popsicles and bubble gum, right? It's just awful. So I said, why don't we instead put a geothermal system in? We'll pull warm water out of the ground. We'll make the entire site a snow melt zone. And instead of spending $96,000 a year on plowing, you just turn on the switch and the warm water will do the rest. And then, by the way, we can also use it as a starting point for heating and cooling the entire hospital. And now he's suddenly a huge sustainability fan. Now it's like I'm his best friend all of a sudden, right? He's hugging me. It's a little uncomfortable, but But this is the mindset. You have to move them out of that fear of this is what I know, this works. I'm afraid to change it into a pain point. The thing I'd say to the clients is innovation starts with pain. So finding what keeps them up at night, finding what they're worried about, finding what's painful. Suddenly, they're much more open to abandon that model and try something else.
I think it's a really great example because also. You're sitting there talking about system awareness, so you're actually being able to integrate that into a system. Now, I'm not quite sure about the simplicity of that system.
No.
That's not a simple system.
The simplicity comes late. It takes a lot of work to make it simple, I find. Like thermal mass is simple, right? If I put a concrete wall in a building and I orient it to the sun, I know it'll warm up during the day and I know it'll release that heat at night. That's it's physics. That's a simple system. But some of the systems we're using are not simple inherently because they're also monitoring and adjusting and adapting and moving and changing. It doesn't mean that I like them better. It's just that's where we are right now in order to achieve the goals that we want to achieve.
Yeah. Do you want to add something? I saw you nodding.
Yeah, just nod because he's so convincing. So.
I hear
no,
you.
but I think I fully agree. We also make buildings, entire sites. The Innovation Park Zurich, for example, which was a project of ours, has of course geothermal systems in it, right? So the VZUG technology cluster, which we are working on, has groundwater and lake water, which we use as an energy ring, so a kind of a tepid water ring, which allows us to either produce heat or cold out of it. So all of these things are in some ways complicated, right? They're complicated and engineered kinds of systems, and yet they reduce the dependency to the larger system, right? They have a side. No site is autonomous. No system is closed, right? But on the other hand, when you're clever in this kind of way, or in the technology cluster 2 kind of way, you reduce dependencies to the higher level of scale, right? Mm-hmm. And with that, I would argue you increase the simplicity of the overall system. It's kind of a federalized solution, rather than you have a big system, let's say a big district heating system, which is organized by a huge amount of sensors and so on and actuators. You have something which is locally distributed, a bit decentralized, and a lot of problems are solved on the local level, and then they are integrated on a larger level only when they need to be. And I think something like that sounds both more logical, more organic, and I think I would argue is in the end more simple. So simplicity is not primitive. Simplicity means it is more governable, right? It's more controllable because we can understand it better, and it has a fail-safe built into it.
I think that's a really, really, really important point. That simplicity is not. How did you say it again?
Simplistic or primitive, right?
Yeah. Primitive. I think that's actually really, really a good one to take away to remember. Before we give you a chance to talk to each other and think what are the questions you'd like to ask, or you want to leave a little more time for questions. Storytelling. As you just said, you were nodding because he was so convincing. He was a good storyteller. So Eric, storytelling, we're going to be putting together some stories here over the next 18 hours. What are some of the secret sauce for you that we should be thinking about?
storytelling often for me starts with, why should I care? Right? Mm-hmm. You have to win the audience over. So you have to first know your audience. Who am I talking to? Who am I trying to win over? And then why should they even care about what you're saying? Mm-hmm. And this is something I learned doing comedy, right? You're walking into a cold room, and you have to hook them right away.
Wait, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Hold on a minute. You do stand-up?
Yeah. You couldn't tell?
Okay.
But that's a different dialogue. But with the storytelling, you have to come out with a
Do you do stand-up comedy too?
No.
No, not at all. No.
Okay, just checking. Any more surprises today?
But I have a really frivolous side.
He's an
not a
adult.
stand-up.
Okay, all right. All right, keep going. So you have to know your crowd.
So, and there are many ways to do that. Sometimes it comes out with a big vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a fun way to do it. And you get them drooling on the vision, right? Me want that. That's what I want to put in their mind. So selling them on a vision is great, and then you have to be convincing enough that you can get them to that vision. So it can't just be the headline, there has to be also the meat of the story.
Yeah.
So the storytelling has to unfold.
Or the tofu.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
So that's a good place to start. The other way to start the story, oddly enough, especially if you're working in communities, is to go in with great humility, which for architects is hard. Yeah. And but go in with great humility and just listen. And this to me was probably the biggest lesson of the last 10 years of working at Living Future Institute and at Eco Districts, of going into thousands of these neighborhoods and districts and communities, and just I'm agnostic to the solution. I have not come with a solution. I'm here just to help you facilitate you to find the solution. So my facilitation hat is very different than my storytelling hat in a weird way, and I will flip back and forth as you have over the last 3 days. So yeah, exactly.
Great, thank you, Eric. For you, what about Markus?
I think in many ways I'm a storyteller posing as an architect, both for marketability and legitimation, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to exist in this world if I didn't have a normal job, So, but I think for me, the reason why I'm an architect is in the end because the project is such a powerful vessel for storytelling. So all the interesting projects, they always start with a really good story, with a really good vision and idea, and you then, as an architect, have to convince people of this idea, or the other way around. You have an amazing client who comes with a story to you, and you have to adapt it in order to make it buildable. And this is what I do the most, maybe best, and also what I like to do most. Right? Is this sort of collective storytelling, because as soon as you have that, you can build a project. The project is a series of tools for management, right? You have a timeline, you have deliverables, you have all this kind of craft of project management. You have an excited group of people who share the vision. You have a shared storyline, and even shared battle stories. I still meet people from old projects I did, and we talk to each other about that Prada store which we did in New York, and how crazy it was to build in all this amazing, crazy, bleeding-edge technology and so on. So you have these battle stories to share, meaning you amalgamated these people together into a team, into a group, And in the end, the building then is the kind of the physical manifestation of that storyline, And I think, therefore, that the storytelling, so what we're trying to do here, I recognize as being highly sensible and of course, meaningful, inherently meaningful.
Good. I think, thank you for that. For both of you, said we need to have the vision.
Sorry?
We have a vision where what we're trying to grip. I think that for us all, how we create the grip to hold the story and fill in behind. So now, I'd like to take a break. For you to talk amongst yourselves, next to each other, or however you want to choose it. Think of a question or two, and I promise to do more than 2 questions. I failed so far, but I'm going to try to do 4 or 5, maybe 6. So we're going to take 3 minutes, and I'm going to time it. I'm going to make a timer. Talk to anybody. What did you hear? What would you like to ask? All right. Here we go. 3 Italian minutes. That was actually 5, so here we go. We have Now, I'd like it to be new people asking questions. If you've already asked a question, you've already had a question. I want others first who haven't asked a question yet, and then we're going to go to those who've been asking them again. I'm just, it's fair for everyone to get the soft voices in here too. So go ahead. You need to ask it.
Thank you so much for these interesting insights. You're both architects, and sustainability in the field of buildings often relies not only on you, but on the many, many co-workers down your production line. And I often hear, if I talk to people that are building walls or that are responsible of heating systems, that I say like, well, when we get into the project, it's too late because some architect already decided how it should look like, and it's never how it's good for sustainability. How do you make sure to streamline your projects in a way that sustainability can be maximized and that the knowledge of all these people can be used?
I think it's a great question. Maybe I can answer first than you. So because it's something which occupies me a lot, right? Because the architectural profession right now, as we speak, is changing a lot. This building I mentioned before by Herzog Dömeron, the Hortus, it was developed by Zen Development. It's in the Innovation Park in Basel, in Allschwil. Is a building where, in some ways, the architects are important, but in other ways, they're actually not. Right? They had a really strong client. The client project lead actually has driven this project very much. And they started actually not with the architectural plans per se, but they started with the building component. So if we are required to build a sustainable building, how do we build it up from components? So what is the unit which we need to think in? They made a module, out of wood with a very simple system. They have a ceiling system, for example, which is made out of timber and clay. And the clay is the actual clay they were digging out of the ground on site. They were ramming that in between these timber things as compression members on the one hand, as thermal mats on the other hand, and thirdly to modify the room moisture, right? So it's always 60% room humidity. And then with that, having that, which was not really an architectural idea first, it was an engineering idea. Having that, the architect then started to implement that into a spatial system. So the architect will move in the food chain, so to speak, of a project down a bit, and on the other hand, the collaboration will need to increase in earlier phases. There are also a series of planning process innovations which are coming out right now. For example, integrated project delivery, something which we do at the Switzerland Innovation Park Central, where very early in the project, engineers, clients, and people who build are collaborating in a way which is in the traditional system very difficult, right? Because effectively in this cascade, which you normally have in the Gantt chart, construction companies come very late. So there's a lot of things are happening right now exactly for the question you're asking.
Very good question. Eric, you want to pop on that too? Because I know
everything you said is true. Architects are a drag. If we come in late, it's done. Well, you can't get sustainability in everything. So there's two sides of that. Number one is I try to get in as early as possible. So I'm with the team. I'm on the interview. I'm in the proposal. I'm baking these things in from the outset. We're selling them on these outcomes before we even win the job. That's the one side of it. The other side of it is we're really looking at three things very importantly: the structure, the envelope, and then the orientation, as I call it. So the structure, if we start with a 10 meter by 10 meter grid, I can do mass timber, but it's very expensive. So if we're planning for something alternative from the outset, that means questioning everything, including the structural grid, the structural system, everything, so I can start to build in some of these things that they won't get removed. The envelope, the same thing. If I do an all-glass box, well, I'm kind of dooming myself to a certain low level of performance, but if I can start to think about the openings and then kind of splaying the openings out right and making that part of the feature, great. And then the orientation, if I make a big wide floor plate, only the rooms around the perimeter are going to get daylight, but if I make a thinner, longer building and orient it east to west, I can start to harness that light throughout the day and make it much deeper. So these things are baked in, at that point, the DNA of the building and can't be removed. And then everything else is just fun at that point, right? Materials and systems, right? That's the fun part.
So I'm going to say, it depends. I think you heard from Markus. I'm going to say it depends. Depends on the client, depends on the situation. As Markus said, in Switzerland, we're very traditional and things are changing. Other parts of the world are not so traditional. It's a hierarchy. So it is a reality, and it's not, depending on where we are. So it's about integrating as early as possible. So I think that's going to be the thing. So we have a question up here. We've got a mic right there.
Yes. So my question relates to what you just talked about, how to scale it up. So in Switzerland we have the Minergie, this Minergie label that net zero energy buildings. How do we scale it up? Is it a matter of cost, or what are the other components of not having it implemented more?
So I'm going to excuse you from this one because you don't know practice here.
Oh, true.
Right? It's a different world, I can tell you that, my friend. Very different world. I'm not going to.
You still have gravity here?
I'm not going to excuse you from this question, but then you can tap in. Minergie, how we scale?
I was actually hoping he would answer first so I can think, but because it's a good question. So the father of Minergie, Rudi Kriesi, was actually a good friend and collaborator of my father. My father produced a lot of solar energy houses where he tried to, in the end, first active gain and second passive gain. And he also made zero energy houses where the house just didn't have heating. Like there was no heating system in the house. There are several of these built. There are 3 of these prototypes are in somewhere in Switzerland. They function perfectly. They're just driven by sun. They have correct orientation. They have sun shading and so on. They have a chimney, but a chimney is for Schmine in German. Fireplace, sorry. But that is just for comfort. It's actually not necessary for caloric gain. And Rudi Kriesi then said, "Hey, dear Uli," my father's name, "this is all great, but this is not scalable because every building you make is a prototype. You need a client with a certain affluence and so on." And then Rudi said, "Well, we need to go via standards," and that's why he implemented the Minergie system. So that at least a certain minimal amount of standard and energy proficiency is simply replicated throughout the Swiss building stock. So this is one idea. I think the other idea is just making good examples and making them desirable, because architects like to imitate, so they like to be, of course, original, but they also like to see cool things and then try to be also cool. Third thing is maybe to share innovation. That's again what we're trying to do in the Switzerland Innovation Park Central, where we bring companies and people together who have ideas in order to share, right, to make a kind of an open innovation system. And the last point is in German, Bestellkompetenz. Yeah. It's the ability of clients with large portfolios to want the right thing and being enabled to ask for the right things. So for example, in the park, in the Innovation Park, we are program managing the Circular Building Charter. Circular Building Charter is an alliance of all the large property owners in Switzerland. So you can only join if you have more than 1 billion Swiss franc in your portfolio. And the idea now is to enable these professional clients to understand what circular building is. I mean, they do that themselves. We just help them manage the outcome of it, so that in the end they are enabled to make a good order, a good brief for the client, for the architect as a client, so that these ideas actually percolate into the larger construction world. So Bestellkompetenz, I think, is for me a huge thing.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Thank you. Very good. Do you want to add anything?
Only
short answer.
Only that modular prefab is still not being utilized to its fullest extent.
Hey, yeah, but it's tough.
Tough.
Romberg, so the Cree system, he's the furthest along. He's here in the Vorarlberg.
Yeah,
it's quite strong.
Okay, we're going to do short questions, short answers.
Yeah, a short question which connects to that, and that is, are you competing or are you competitive on the basis of price or on the basis of legislation, regulation? Because what I know, most people in the built environment go according to price, because price is what public officials are mostly interested in, and they basically say we cannot afford what you're able to build. So is it more a question of changing regulation or having efficiencies in price?
Well, here's where America might be very different. The client comes to us with a budget, and the budget is a byproduct of a bond or equity or whatever. And they go, this is the budget, and if you spend $1 more, we're going to yell at you, right? So in a certain way, it frees us up because then they can pick the team based on our approach to the project. So very different mindset.
Yeah.
But pricing is always a concern, especially post-COVID. We had a huge escalation of construction costs in the States. I imagine that happened here.
Here too, yeah.
And so, we were doing a hospital. It was going to be, I think, 15 stories. It's still 15 stories, but only 10 of the stories are finished now. They left the top 5 unfinished for later because of escalation costs. So we still met it on budget. We just got less out of it.
Yeah.
Not ideal.
Interesting.
I think in many ways, I think we still compete very much with the best solution. We have a fairly functioning competition system in Switzerland, and so we are still in the luxurious situation that oftentimes we are able to compete with the best solution, but also fail if we don't have the best one.
Yeah, we're trying to get that system actually protected as UNESCO Kulturerbe.
It's a good idea.
I'm actually serious. This is the competition system. Okay, we got one more question. I think that's gonna be it. Sorry, guys. Short question, short answer.
Short question. How do you quantify sustainability, including economical sustainability? Because I think you both have to improve continuously, and customers ask for sustainability, but often they don't know what they are talking about.
I push back on your question a little because it implies that sustainability costs more, which most people assume.
Yeah, it doesn't.
In fact, they come at me with why does sustainability cost more? It's like, how long have you been sleeping with your dog? Like that kind of, accusatory, whoa. And only half the crowd got that joke.
Yeah.
I would argue it doesn't, it really depends. When are you measuring cost? If I'm measuring the upfront cost just to build the building, that's one period in time. But if I build you a building cheaply that takes a lot to operate, I'm not doing you any favors. I'm certainly not increasing the valuation of the building, and certainly not helping your bottom line or your cash flow. So we're taking a much more life cycle approach, especially on the major elements of the building, like the mechanical systems, right? So we're looking for anything that has a payback. And then I'm also including things that don't have a financial payback, but might have some sort of, I guess you call it emotional payback. For example, if I'm going to put in a chilled beam system in a building, it might cost more up front, but it's a lot cheaper to operate. But it also has acoustical benefits, infection control benefits, dust control benefits, comfort benefits that have value as well. And so we paint that full picture to the client so they can make an informed decision. My job at the end of the day is to give them the information they need to decide. That's how I view the role of an architect, right?
Good.
I'm not deciding anything. I'm trying to build the best building for them and give them the information so they can choose that.
Yeah. Good answer. Do you want to add to that?
Oh, I think it's perfectly
Succinct.
answered. Perfect. And I think we also have by now actually really
But
sophisticated.
you do want to add something.
No, which is
that's all right.
because you
okay.
asked me. So now I think we also have really sophisticated clients. Don't forget that also the client expertise grew over the last 30 years in this sustainability context actually a lot. So we have hugely sophisticated briefs which we need to fulfill, which always have this triple issue of sustainability, right? Economical, ecological, and social. So also SDG goals we need to fulfill, SDG we need to fulfill. So I think there's a lot of sophistication already out there.
We're going to stop here. Gentlemen, thank you so much, Eric, Markus, for sharing your wisdom. It's really great.